Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're working on a 1995 Polaris Magnum 425. Basically what we're going to do today is remove the carburetor, and for that you've got to take the tank off. So there's these tabs right up front we're going to loosen. Next what we're going to do is take these side panels off here. Going to give that tank cover a little wiggle. They'll eventually come off. There's no screws that actually hold those on once you get the side screws off. So now I'm taking the two Phillips screws off from the fuel tank bracket, and that just slides right off pretty easily. As you notice, the headlight is missing. I forgot to record that. There's just two little screws up there by that little dash part by the choke and the key. So once those come off, there's really nothing else holding those on. So I got two bolts coming off here for the tank, one on each side. There was one that was a little bit rusted, so that one came off a little rough, but nonetheless we got it. So after this, what we're going to do is we're going to pull the fuel pickup switch, and that'll allow us to slide the tank up sideways there. Once you got your fuel tank disconnected, disconnect the line. What I'm pointing out there is that looks like somebody had put a weird line on it, filter. So we got the vacuum line for the fuel pump, so we're going to disconnect that, and then we're going to disconnect the clamp for the carburetor, and the hose here for the pump to the carburetor. At this point, I dumped it upside down just to see what kind of fuel contents were in there. There was none, so I decided to put the carburetor back on temporarily. I got a little reservoir here for some fuel that I'm going to hook up to try to bypass the fuel pump. We're just going to see that see if it fires up here with this gravity-fed little fuel reservoir. So I got my gas can there in the background. I spilled a bunch of gas. That's great. So I've got it filled back up. Turn that fuel petcock on. We'll give it a couple cranks here. I assure you that it definitely did not start up. And I was checking just now. I was checking for fuel flow from my reservoir. I decided to plug the vacuum line back in. Maybe think that wasn't starting due to a big vacuum leak. So I ingested some carburetor cleaner you saw just before that, and it did fire. So that basically tells me that all the ignition system and safety kill switches, all of that seems to be working properly. So I'm moving forward. So I got the carb back off. I dumped it upside down. Still not a whole lot of fuel in that carburetor. So during the disassembly, I did notice that this intake boot here, it's old. Almost 30 years old, is 30 years old. And I decided to take that off because I thought I saw a little bit of a crack. There's only two bolts there, so I'm trying to point out a crack there. I'm going to squirt some carb clean on it, see if any of that liquid kind of bleeds through that rubber. Nothing that I saw that was too crazy, nothing to worry about. I decided to stick a screwdriver in there to kind of add some stress to it, and still no cracks that I saw, so that's good. We'll get that installed later. At this point with the carburetor, I still don't have any of the choke or anything unhooked. We're just doing a simple carb clean on it. I've got all the 4 screws taken out of the bowl. I'm inspecting it right at this point. Don't see any huge debris, huge gunk. Looks like maybe somebody was in there just kind of spraying some carb clean around and cleaned kind of the surface of it, but clearly something else is going on, so we decided to disassemble. I made a little screwdriver. I pulled the pilot out here. You can definitely see that there's no light through it. It was gunked up. So that'll definitely need to be cleaned out. This pilot jet actually controls the starter circuit, and it will not idle with that clogged up. So since we got everything disassembled, we'll go ahead and take the main out. There's a little washer there, so keep that in mind when you're disassembling. At this point, I did notice that the float was moving up and down, but the float needle was not moving, so I knew that was seized. I took my little vacuum pump there, try to apply some vacuum to see if the float needle would seal, and it definitely does not. What we'll do next is I got me a little pick, and I'm just going to try to get this this float pin out here. This is where it pivots. So Give it a little tap here, try to get it slide out. This one was kind of odd. Usually I don't deal with a whole lot of float pivot pins that are installed one way. Usually they you can install them one way or another, it doesn't matter, but this one was directional. So here I am trying to get it out essentially, and I decided that it might be directional, so I put everything back to the way it was, kind of gave it some love taps to get it to slide back in there, and we're gonna try to get it to slide out the opposite way. And it does take me a couple tries, but I got it. And I tried to point out there that it had kind of some teeth on it there, so show you that it's directional. So finally got the float out. The float needle is definitely seized there. There's a little screw that'll get the seat out. So we're gonna undo that screw. And we're gonna take some pair of pliers and give some love there and get it pulled out. So now we got the seat out. Keep in mind the float needle is still in there; it's seized in there. So I don't need to have a new float needle replaced, and the seat will need to be replaced. So we'll get that taken care of here. We're going to put everything into the carb soak, and in the meantime, I'm going to put this intake back on. It's only got those 2 bolts. Those bolts are pretty thick. I mean, I ran it in there with a 1/4 inch impact, and it stopped, and it didn't over tighten at all, so I'm not real worried about it. So now that everything's clean, we'll go back and disassemble, or back and assemble it. So we got the screw here, get the seat in there, put the screw in, and what I'm doing here is I'm putting the float needle back on the white floats there, so that way I can all slide it in as an assembly. And this pin again is one direction, so it took me a second to figure out exactly what side it goes in first. So finally it went in pretty good. Give some love taps again to get those teeth to bite on that. So as of right now, it does appear that that float and needle are working again. So we're going to reassemble. Eventually, this carb will get a new rebuild kit, but for diagnosis, I'm just trying to get it cleaned up so we can see if it runs. So the main's back in, the pilot's back in. We got our gasket there. We're going to get it pushed in there. Do push on it, it'll seat in there. There are little tabs that kind of keep it held up. Right here I get 3 screws in. I ended up dropping one, go figure. So after I got the other 3 in, found the one, and we got that bowl all tightened up. I'm going to get this back on the bike and give it a nice push. Get it screwed on, get that clamp nice and tight so that way there's no air leaks. And this next step is when I decided now I can kind of hook up the vacuum line, and I'll grab my reservoir again, try to bypass that fuel pump. But then I decided, well, I'll just see if the pump will prime. So I used the little reservoir I got there as a fuel source, and so the fuel source I've got here is actually hooked up to the pump, and then the pump line to the carburetor. Give it a few cranks just to prime that line, and I got it hooked up to the carburetor at this point. It's still not firing up like I thought it would. I thought maybe that crank for a while and eventually start up. It still didn't. So it seemed like it cranked for a while and it wasn't firing, so I decided to check the spark on this. So got the right socket eventually. Get that spark plug torn out. All we're going to do with this spark plug is just a breezy test. I'm sure everybody's seen before. We'll just get it hooked up to the coil here, put it on the block around it, crank it over. It has a good strong blue spark, so we'll get that spark plug back in. So we know that's still good. That's checked. And at this point, I did put my hand over it to create excessive vacuum in the carburetor to try to prime it a little bit faster. And at this point, it is running. So I stuck my finger, just try to get the slide to maybe work, make sure it's working. So everything seems to be running at this point. It does run poorly. Like I said, we're going to eventually get a new carb kit on there. You can kind of see the carburetor's vibrating, so it's running there. So that does appear to be the issue though with this bike. So it's all finished up. I'm checking to see if the diaphragm is coming up and down like it should. Checking the operation overall, trying to see if I can figure out exactly what's running poorly. That's it for now. Once we get this carburetor kit in, I'll make another video on how to completely rebuild it. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to the channel.